So today I'm speaking about spiritual awakenings, and I would define a spiritual awakening by a major shift in consciousness. That's what I think it is. Ultimately, it's a major shift in consciousness. Now, I've personally had many spiritual awakenings. The biggest one when my mom passed away, and that's actually really common to go through that whenever you have a major loss in your life, whether it be, I don't know, income, marriage, the end of a marriage, the loss of life, like I said. And personally, I just feel like I should share some of the things that I felt whenever I was going through this awakening and the previous ones before in my life, right? I do want to start by saying that it's really, really common right now for you to see a lot about spiritual awakenings on TikTok and other social media sites. And I just want to say that it is different for everyone. That if you don't check off all the boxes of the creator of the video that you're watching, and it doesn't sound like you, it doesn't mean that you're not going through a spiritual awakening. So just keep that in mind. So, one of the first things that happened to me is that my sense of perception changed. And what I mean by that is that the way that I perceived the things that people were saying to me, the things that people were doing, what I was doing, and basically the way I perceived the world as a whole shifted. And the way that I smelled things, the way that my taste even changed, which was, I found that really interesting. More specifically, like I hated eggs my entire life. I couldn't stand eating eggs. Even the smell of them was kind of weird to me. It's like eating plastic, but now I eat eggs. I know that's such a small, silly thing, to share as an example, but it happens when you're going through a spiritual awakening. Your senses open up more, and you start wanting to be a little bit more open to experiencing certain things in your life. So, other than my perception changing, another thing that changed is the relationships to people in my life, and that kind of connects with my perception. I started noticing that there were certain things, whether it be personality traits or things that my friends and my family were doing that I just really I didn't really align with anymore. And it's not that I just shut them off and I ghosted them or I completely shut them out of my life. It's not that. It's just that I no longer found it to be appealing to be around them. And this is a big thing about going through a spiritual awakening. I think I should add really quick. Not looking at it as if you are different from someone and you are more than, that you're a better person than they are. Because that's really not the way to look at it. When I say that my relationships changed, I mean that I just no longer wanted to do the same things that they were doing. We were no longer in alignment, like I said. So, another thing that changed for me while going through a spiritual awakening is my want to be alone or be with myself, is what I like to say. Now, I think we've all been the type of person, or at least kind of thought that we shouldn't do certain things in public by yourself or else you'll look a certain way. And I 100% was one of those people. But years and years ago, I remember asking myself, like, why should I be afraid to eat lunch by myself? I don't need my friends to come with me. I don't need to do something with someone all the time. It's not necessary. So why not challenge myself to, be okay with being with myself in public? And that happened after a spiritual awakening of mine. And that's when I started traveling by myself and I started doing a lot of things and being comfortable with being alone. Because you're really never alone anyway. I mean, there's always someone there, and it's an opportunity for you to make a friend instead of kind of being in your little comfort zone because you've brought a friend with you, which is exactly what, like, yes, you do want to spend time with people to, have that experience with them and stuff like that. But let's be honest here. Do you always have to have someone with you? Because, like, do you need to have someone with you is my question. And the question is no, or the answer is no. So, anyways, when I went through one of my spiritual awakenings is when I started traveling by myself and I started really just being okay with being alone. And oh my gosh, like the experiences, I can't list them all, honestly. Like I've learned more about myself by doing that. So another example of what happens when you're going through a spiritual awakening is that your hobbies and your interests change. Now, for me personally, I've always had basically a cycle of different hobbies, and they were always the same hobbies that were very like they were similar to each other, but I would cycle through them like every 7 years, which is actually really interesting. But I noticed that when I went through one of my spiritual awakenings, right after that, I wanted to do more outside of the house. So I had a lot of introverted hobbies at home where I would paint, I would draw, I would write, I would do whatever I needed to do, like inside of the comfort of my home. But when I had this awakening, I started to want to venture outside and venture around large groups of people and talk to people and meet people and go to events and all this extrovert activities. And I thought that was just like really, really interesting because by heart, I'm an introvert, but I'm like obsessed now. Obsessed is the correct word, yes, with learning about people and their experiences. I yearn for an intellectual conversation 24/7 now. Like people are like, "Oh, you don't really small talk, do you?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. We only big talk here because I'm only interested in learning the most important things about people, not the little things that we say when we're sitting at tea or having tea and when we are afraid to really ask those deep meaningful questions to people. Like I want to know, what have you learned about yourself recently that's changed the course of your life? I want to ask the mindful questions now. And yeah, that's just a perfect example of of one of the major things that have changed for me through after one of my recent spiritual awakenings. So one thing I want to add is that you end up having less and less in common with the people that you have a relationship with. And this kind of ties into what I just mentioned about how your friends or your friend circle becomes smaller and smaller after, time goes by, but you really do have less and less in common with the people that that you've had relationships with. And it's okay. My favorite thing that's happened after going through a spiritual awakening is cherishing simple pleasures. I mean, I'm talking about anywhere between waking up in the morning, the sky, my body, how I feel, the fact that I have 2 arms and 2 legs. No offense to anyone who doesn't. I'm just saying, like, I love my body. I love my voice. I love my experiences. I love the opportunities that I've had. I love everything. And one of the main, this is probably the most amazing things that happen when you are going through a spiritual awakening is you love everything and everyone. It might not feel always like that. Like it's not a continuous emotion, no, because people piss you off at some point. But, at some point you think about it and you're just like, holy crap, like I truly do love everything and everyone. I love that I'm here and I get to experience Earth School. You're no longer complaining about, oh, I gotta leave. I can't wait to reincarnate. I'm never coming back here. Like, you don't say that stuff because the fact of the matter is, we're here to learn and to grow and become better souls and better people. And it's just the opportunity in itself is just an absolute beautiful, beautiful thing. Oh, another fun one is, and I love this. I'm getting chills just like thinking about it. So another fun thing that's happened is my spiritual gifts have increased. And it's going to happen to you as well because we are all psychic beings. We all are very energetic beings who have these abilities. No one's special, but we all have different types too. So you might find yourself just sitting there watching TV and then all of a sudden you hear or see something in the corner of your eyes, or you might hear something in your ear and you're like, what the heck is that? That's crazy. And don't be afraid of it. It's just you being a little bit more in tune and you being more sensitive to the energies that are around us. And some of these energies aren't full bodied. They're, in the astral plane. That's another video. We'll talk about that later. But another thing too is you find yourself being more interested in that realm. And if you're like me, you do a major deep dive into it and you go down the rabbit hole of learning about clairvoyance and learning about like the history of, I don't know, history of the world, I guess, the universe and astral projection and metaphysics and all this stuff. It's just becomes so fun. And you find yourself buying like stacks and stacks of books and listening to audiobooks and just learning more about the universe. So that's an obvious sign, I guess. You just, your interest, going back to what I just mentioned, your interests change and you no longer care about like the next episode of the Bad Girls Club or something, or the Real Housewives of California. Like, who cares about that stuff? The reality TV things. Um, but I was gonna go on a tangent about that a second. But yeah, I just want to say that like you open up to the world of metaphysics and it becomes more interesting to you. Another thing is, and I kind of already mentioned this, but I think I want to really touch on it a little bit more, is you become detached from your previous belief systems. So if you were someone who was a strong Christian, or maybe you were a strong Buddhist, I don't know, maybe you were strong anything, you start kind of reevaluating some of the things that you've thought in the past. And it doesn't mean that you change your mind. It just means that you kind of like go deeper into it. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like everything is connected in one way, shape, or form. And when you do this deep dive, you're going to start realizing that. But I will say this: a lot of people, when they start their spiritual awakening, they start kind of like separating the different modalities of belief systems out there, right? They start saying, "Well, I don't believe this anymore because this, and this was wrong," and blah 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 blah. But the reality of it is, like I said, everything's connected in one way, shape, or form. So when you get to that point, that's when you really know, okay, you got it figured out now. And it's starting to flow with you a little bit. Um, it's so funny because I'm trying not to go super deep into these topics because I want to do separate videos about them. But it's a little hard for me to do that because I just kind of want to ramble on. So yeah, your belief systems change. So another thing that happens is you start getting more deja vu. And if you don't know what deja vu is, basically when you have like these flashes of scenes in your mind's eye, or even depending on how you look at things, but I'd like to say mind's eye, and it reminds you of a past experience or present, depending on who you're asking. Um, but yeah, that's deja vu. So you're having more flashes of deja vu, and also you're seeing something called synchronicities. Synchronicities are something that you see that is a repeating pattern in some way, shape, or form. It could also be something that someone says too. That happens to me a lot. So the most common one on social media right now is seeing a synchronicity of repeating numbers or a number that you've seen before multiple times. That is probably the easiest example. Another uncommon example is when you're speaking to someone, you're having a conversation with one person, then you're having a conversation you're having a conversation with one person about a specific topic, then you're having another conversation with someone else, and it happens to be like the same topic, but you didn't bring it up, they brought it up, and it's like, whoa, 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 where's this coming from? And, obviously it's coming from out there. So, um, you're seeing more deja vus and synchronicities, and that's a major, major sign of having a spiritual awakening. And I think it's probably the sign that drives people the most crazy because they end up having to try to figure out what the heck it means, especially if it's a symbol of some sort. It's like, why do I keep seeing this? Like, just tell me, you know? But ultimately, you have to learn how to discern your own symbols. And it's fun doing that when you can get past your ego mind and you can stop trying to control everything. And when you figure it out, you're like, holy crap, I figured out what this sign means to me. Now I can use this as a sign that I'm doing really well, or a sign to go, or that I need to do X, Y, and Z. Who knows what it is? But another sign is that you're going through a spiritual awakening is your dreams become more vivid, and you also start lucid dreaming more. So we already know what vivid dreams are. It's literally brightly colored dreams that are just really intense. But lucid dreaming is the ability to control your dreams. Not necessarily control everything about them, but you become aware within the dream, and then you can kind of change aspects of the dream based off of that awareness. So, really cool. I love it. I'm super connected with my dreams, and I'll do a video about it pretty soon. But Yeah, my favorite thing to do is to ask my guides before I go to sleep to have certain dreams, to tell me certain messages that I need to hear, messages that my waking mind might be kind of like suppressing. And my subconscious mind is like, yo, listen up. You're not listening. So I have this dream, my subconscious mind shows me, what's going on. But yeah, you get a chance to kind of like play around with that more when you're going through a spiritual awakening. And it's something that you don't really think about beforehand. You grow up thinking that dreams are just dreams and it just happens. If you eat grapes before you go to bed, you're going to have a nightmare. Like, that's crazy. No. The next one would be self reflecting more. You realize that you are not perfect and that you make mistakes and that some of your mistakes have been the trauma or the cause of someone else's trauma. So, yeah, that's called self reflection. That's called realizing that, hey, maybe I shouldn't have said and done that. Or maybe I'm not looking at this particular situation in the way that I should be looking at it. Yes. And it's a beautiful thing too when you get to that point. I'm telling you, like it allows you to have the best relationships in your life because you're okay with being, maybe not okay with, but you're more comfortable with being vulnerable with the person that you are speaking with, or the person that you have a relationship with. You're able to say, hey, I love you, but I feel like crap when you say and do these things. And I know that maybe I've triggered something inside of you that made you feel like you needed to say that. I don't know, but that's just, it's a really specific situation or example, I mean. So, yes, you do become more self reflective. And another thing is you become more intuitive. Yeah. This kind of goes along with like the clairvoyance and you becoming more spiritual and starting to realize more about the universe and stuff. But the intuition needed its own little category because when you become more intuitive, then that's when those perceptions of people really start coming out. You start realizing, like, you start feeling that strong emotion of just having, like, knowing something, knowing, I love that word, knowing that something is happening, something's about to happen, something, you know, I don't know. It's a really horrible way of I'm explaining it right now, but basically, your intuition becomes stronger, and then you kind of just hopefully you follow it. So I do want to briefly talk about this little rough patch that people say that you go through when you are going through a spiritual awakening. When you pull together all of the things that I just mentioned to you about like the signs of you going through a spiritual awakening, at some point people do kind of go into a little depression because this depression, like in my opinion, this depression comes from the realization that the world isn't what it seems. Like we grow up, we have this sort of image and perception based on human society that they've kind of taught us to be and to act like and to do. And it's really just our ego mind. And when you crush that ego mind of yours and you basically not necessarily get rid of it because it's impossible, we all have it, but we kind of like learn to navigate through it, that's when a depression sets because then you realize like, I haven't had it all figured out. This is like you're being reborn in a way. You're not growing up, but you're growing down. And when you're growing down, that's when everything kind of like, it can become overwhelming. So, my message to you, if you are thinking that, and after everything I just explained to you, if you feel like you're going through a spiritual awakening, do not be afraid of the moment where everything kind of just comes together. And, you know, there is a possibility that you might kind of be in a little, what they would call a dark night of the soul. I believe Carl Jung coined that term, but the dark night of the soul. It might have been Sigmund Freud. But don't be afraid of it. It's a rite of passage in a way. And once you get through that feeling of, you know, the fact that you've lived however long on this earth and you by far not have it all figured out, you'll be an even better person. So, but yeah, ultimately what happens is you surrender, you let it go, you let it flow is what I like to say, and you kind of just exist. That's it. That's all we're here for, is to simply exist. And once you realize that, then everything becomes a lot easier. If you like this video and you are also going through a spiritual awakening, let me know what you think down in the comments. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and last but not least, thank you for existing.